Welcome to the Unshaken Men's Podcast, where men are built, not born. I'm your host, Jonathan Miller, bringing you real talk for real men, rooted in Christ. Like and subscribe wherever you're listening, and check us out on Instagram at Unshaken Men's Podcast. Today I'm joined by a brother I have the honor of serving shield to shield with in ministry, a man that I deeply respect and get to serve with alongside at Alabama Clinical Schools, which is a juvenile facility that we get to minister to through Church of the Highlands. Ross is a commander in the U.S. Marshal's office. He's a father, a certified DISC personality instructor, and a powerful leader in the field and his home and here at ACS. Ross, seriously, bro, thank you for being here. I really have a massive amount of respect for you, and I'm super excited for our conversation today, so thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
All right, so I sort of have an idea of what you do, but for those that don't know you, can you just tell me a little bit about what you do as the commander of the Fugitive Task Force?
Yeah, so the official name is Gulf Coast Regional Fugitive Task Force, and so we're one of 8 regionals. We're divided into 8 offices over 2 states. We're a headquarters entity, and our primary mission is to locate violent felons that are wanted for state and local offenses.
Okay. What kind of led you into that job?
So my mom was a probation officer, and then she turned school teacher, and so she had an interesting perspective. I grew up around law enforcement, and really in our household when we grew up, it was, hey, we're going to follow the rules, we're going to do the right thing. Had great examples with my parents, and I think just a culmination of all of that kind of shaped that future for me.
Yeah. What did your dad do?
He worked for Georgia Power.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. What's the biggest difference between what people think that you do as a U.S. Marshal versus what you actually do?
So a lot of people think that I ride on airplanes every day, and that's different. Those are air marshals. Yeah, so I don't know that a lot of people know what it is, and I think the best version of how I can explain what the U.S. Marshal Service is, it's essentially the sheriff's office for the federal government. So there's a lot of different tasks that the Marshal Service does through the judiciary, through protection, details, through prisoner operations and various means, but we're in a specialized unit that is just solely responsible for assisting our state and local law enforcement in their backlog of violent felon warrants.
So, what are the type of guys that you are going and making arrests for?
So there are a lot of violent offenses to include murder, assaults, robberies, sexual offenses such as rape and sexual assaults and things like that. So in Alabama, they're called Class 1 felonies, and so those are the highest level felonies that you can have put against you in the state of Alabama.
Yeah. I know that's got to be at least somewhat nerve-wracking, right? I mean, you're interacting with violent criminals pretty regularly, so, yeah. I mean, how does your faith tie into that, having the faith that God will protect you?
Yeah, so we have a lot of people that we work with, that we work with through our task force officers, and so what we do is we special deputize state and local officers from various municipalities and sheriff's office in the areas in which our offices are located. And so our goal is to get everybody on the same page, and training wise, tactically wise, and investigative wise, so we can work as a cohesive unit. There's a lot of things that we're trained on that will allow us to get people on the same page, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with human beings, and that's volatile, and we don't always know what's going to happen, and certainly a lot of the things that we do are unpredictable. And so I think over the years where I thought that I could kind of control the outcomes and the successes or the failures of our teams that we're working on or leading, I've realized that I can't do that, and that's not something that I can necessarily control. And so what gives me peace and what gives my family peace is that I'm operating in faith. And so the decisions that that I make are faith-based. Stay in prayer, ask for guidance and wisdom, ask for some clarity on decisions that are made, because I know that a lot of the times the decisions that I can either affect or alter can have good or bad effects on the team that I'm leading. And so with that, I know that it's not something that I can control or I can do on my own, that I need to have God and the Lord with me as we're going through these trials and tribulations that we have at work.
That's good, bro. Have you ever had a moment where you felt like God really showed up or maybe protected you for something?
Countless times, and I'm sure there's times that I thought that my actions were the result of something good or positive happening, and I often, even on my drive home from work, a lot of times is silent, no radio, no anything. And I take that time to reflect, and in the moment, maybe it's not something that is ever present on my mind, but there are times shortly after maybe the encounters that we've had, some violent encounters that we've had, I'm like, just kind of thought to myself or reflected to myself, there was divine intervention on that part, and that, I'm trying to be more cognizant of giving glory to God on those fronts, and not just thinking that's something that we did because we're good at our jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you and I have talked about before, like you can prepare and you prepare well, but there is at some point a level of just you can't prepare any more than you already have, and you just have to have faith that God's going to protect you, and if it's your time, it's your time.
And that's true. Yeah, we have talked about that, and every day, because you never know. Like we pre-plan things a lot. Sometimes things just come up that we're not necessarily thinking that we were doing that day, and so we go through our preparation process as best we can, and of course, we understand the strengths and weaknesses of the people that are on the teams and the people that we operate with, and we try to set them up for success. But a lot of times, those plans change, and things may happen where people are in positions, and I'm speaking tactically, like they may not be in the best position that they can be in, that highlights their strengths. But faith gets us through that, and I think leading people, and when you're leading in faith, and people know your heart and where you're coming from as a leader, and the moral stance that comes from being a Christian, I think people buy into that a little more, and that they have more respect and trust in you. But it all goes back to our faith, and so there's many times we end up in situations where, like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
And how are we going to get through it? And so sometimes they're quick instances, and sometimes they're drawn out. And yeah, you just have to have faith and have a belief that whatever happens, and it's going to happen for a reason, and we're at peace with that, or I'm at peace with that.
Yeah. You actually told a story at ACS during a sermon pretty recently about a time that you were not prepared for something to happen on an arrest. Can you tell that story? Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'd love for everyone to hear it, because I thought it was hilarious at the time. So
yeah. So entering a residence to look for a wanted individual on a violent felony. So we approached the structure. We were encountered by a female who were interviewing at the front of the house, at the front door. We get consent to enter, to go look for the person, and the way I set the scene up, I'm describing what I'm wearing. So we have the helmets on, we have the vest on, we have all the stuff on that we normally wear to keep us safe.
Yeah, you're looking like SEAL Team 6 about to bust the door down.
Trying to, not quite in the shape that they are in, but yeah. So our best efforts in that, and so throughout, kind of moving through the structure, trying to find this individual, we get information from the people that are doing the interview on the front that there's an animal or a couple of animals in the house, and so we learned that those are squirrels. And so immediately our attention and focus is not directed on the task at hand. We're used to encountering dogs and cats and all the other things, but squirrels I think is a new one for all of us. And so immediately the concern is not the hallway and the bedroom at the end of the hallway that we're necessarily trying to get to safely, but now what is the squirrel doing? And so the thoughts in my mind are they nice squirrels? Are they pet squirrels? Are they wild squirrels? Are they supposed to be there? All the things. And so as we move throughout the structure, and we're continuing to gain intelligence on the animals that are in there.
So like you haven't seen the squirrels yet, right? This is just somebody has told you over the earpiece, hey, there's a squirrel in the house.
Yeah. So we're getting this information while we're inside the house from the people that are on the outside of the house. And so we learned that there's a nice squirrel and there's not so nice squirrel. And so we haven't seen the squirrel. And so anyway, so as we move throughout the structure, you see a flash go across the hallway. And so that gives us pause, and we're like, hey, we're thinking that's maybe the squirrel. And so continue on. Well, just maybe a few seconds or a couple minutes in later, you start hearing some ruckus behind us, right? And so noises are being made. And these are grown men, right, that have been in a lot of violent encounters, very, very, tactically sound, very experienced individuals. And as the what we think happened was a squirrel was hunting us, and that's so
you go to make an arrest and you're hunted by a squirrel.
And so that's how we think the squirrel was kind of like learning our movements and then kind of digested what we were doing. It did flank us around the side of our a stack, if you will, and so it starts working its way up. It actually got behind us, and so our rear security will have to work on that. But it actually made its way up some of our people and was hopping from person to person, and so. All the training that we've done this hundreds of times with these same people over and over again. We train it, we do it in real life. And so our point people, the ones that are making the calls for the rest of the team that are behind us and trying to put everybody in a good situation. So we completely lose the integrity of that as the squirrel jumps onto the point man, runs across the arm, and then jumps off the point man. And so It was funny in the moment. We had some people, again, grown men that were scared. Yeah. I'll say it. I've told them that, and it ended up being a funny situation. But we completely lost focus on what we were doing, and so the lesson was we had to, even though we had never encountered that, never trained that, never seen that in real life before, we had to refocus our efforts and to the task at hand.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like there's some sort of biblical, and you did tie this into that sermon. There's a biblical teaching there of being distracted and being pulled off task by something you're not expecting or prepared for.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the point that I was trying to make with ACS was you can be on the right path and you can train for the right path, and you can be in the Word of God, and you can try to live as godly as you can and be a good example to others through Christ. But you're going to have a squirrel that's going to run off your arm every now and then. You're going to get distracted, right? And then the point being to get back on task and take care of what needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, I can only imagine grown men, hardcore, battle tested, and a squirrel just making them scream like little schoolgirls.
It still comes up today. It does. Yeah.
Oh, you'll never let him forget.
No.
You kept your composure though, right?
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Yeah. Of course I did. Yeah. I didn't even blink.
So we've mentioned ACS a couple of times, and actually, so this is going to be somewhere in the episode 3 range, I believe, of the way we release this, and I have not actually mentioned ACS yet, and it's a big part of both of our lives. Right. So will you actually kind of tell the audience what is ACS, what do we do there, what's kind of your role?
Yeah. So unfortunately, and by the grace of God, I'll get into some of how I got into ACS, if that's okay. Yeah, so I've been in a small group for going on 2 years now, and one of our small group members has served at ACS, and he had brought that up.
Shout out to Brad. Yeah. Brad is incredible.
Yes, yeah. So he had brought it up, and it had been he had spoken about it at our small group, and of course it piqued my interest, given the nature of my law enforcement experience, and it was spoken very highly of, and it seemed like an incredible place to be. And it just so happened that I think over the next month or 6 weeks or so that juvenile or the correctional ministries at Highlands, specifically juvenile corrections, had been mentioned in some part during the service. I think about the third time it was like hitting me in the head like a hammer. I was like, okay, so it's being spoken about at small group. We're talking about it, and it's been spoken on at Highlands 3 times now.
Yeah, we've talked about before how you and I are the same way. Like if the Holy Spirit wants us to do something or God is trying to tell us something, we got to be hit with it over and over and over again.
And I'm not very bright, but at that point I'm like, so I looked at my wife and I was like, all right, that's 3 or 4 times now. And so anyway, we began to explore that. That's when you and I spoke and started the journey at ACS. And so being there, of course, the first few times was trying to be comfortable and trying to get your feet wet, trying to understand the dynamic and of what the facility is, who the boys are, what the staff is like, and I think I felt really comfortable in there pretty early on, and getting to connect with the boys. They're given come from various backgrounds and different circumstances, and really getting a chance to sit down with them and connect with them and get to know them. And this is an incredible facility, and they're doing incredible things thanks to your leadership for them, of course. And so, but my role specifically in there now is co-leading with you, and it's been an incredible opportunity. I think that my faith has gotten stronger by doing it, and by being a part of the leadership there, and getting to mentor and share my faith and speak to them in various capacities, even if it's sitting in the corner or sitting in the middle of the crowd, even worship songs or standing up and talking about a squirrel jumping off an arm of one of our guys, right? And so, but it's been an amazing opportunity, and I think given my professional background, I think provides some insight to where I can connect with some of the boys. And we spoke about it, how when should I introduce that part of my life in there, and because I know that could be a trigger for some of them, and maybe they haven't had a great experience with law enforcement in the past, and I was kind of nervous about it, prayed on it, and obviously when the time that I got to get up and give a sermon to them, I felt it right, and prayed on it and kind of prepared throughout the week for it, and it felt right, and I think it was well received, and since then, I think that's opened some doors to some of the boys that maybe I hadn't had a deeper connection with, because they'll come up to me now and ask, hey, what'd you do at work this week, and get to share some of those stories with them, and really connect with some of the ones that I may not have connected with in my previous time there, and so personally, and what I prayed on a lot to get into the facility was like, can my experiences and can my background help shape the future for some of these boys who may not go down the right path? Because when they get out, I think some of their immediate futures are a little uncertain, where they're going to go, their living situations and whatnot, and we don't want them to fall back into some things that could have gotten them in trouble. So, my hope and what I pray for is that my time with them, my stories with them, mentoring them, or fellowshipping with them, worshiping with them will help shape their future for the better through God.
Yeah. I remember when I can still remember when we talked on the phone for the first time. Brad had sent your contact information to me and said that you were interested in serving with us. And I think we talked on the phone for at least half an hour. Yeah. And I hung up, and Amanda and I were driving, my wife Amanda and I were driving back from somewhere, and I looked over at her and I said, this guy is going to be amazing. I told her I was so excited to have you serving with us. And even at that moment, I had no idea to the level of which you would step into leadership, the way the boys would just really love and connect to you. I mean, they really respect you and look up to you as an authority figure in their lives. A lot of them have had very poor male role models in their lives. Right. So to have a strong male role model who is in law enforcement, that's two things they usually don't have good experiences with. And so for you to be such a loving and kind person, and them to get to see that has been really, really big for them. So I appreciate that.
Well, no, and I'll be honest, when I became interested and that path started opening up a little bit, I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know what my role would be. And to be honest, I didn't think that it would be what I'm doing now, but obviously that's not up to me. Yeah. And having the faith that the decisions are made, and knowing that we have a leader in you, and that you have the faith in me, only strengthens that thought and that drive for me to continue doing that. And I think one thing that I've learned on the leadership side through over 15 years now with the Marshal service, and the vast majority of that time being in fugitive investigations and leading teams and leading multiple teams in the various capacities that I've worked in this agency. We've had good leaders, we've had bad leaders, and I like to study the leadership stuff. You mentioned the DISC instructor certification, that I have, and I've had that for a while, and I try to continue to stay up to date on different leadership styles and kind of what works. But I think the overwhelming characteristic is, and I'm an instructor in a leadership class in our agency too, and we always poll, or there's always polls that are taken from the class that list your top 5 characteristics of a leader, right? And one's communication, that's usually up there, and then one of them ends up being empathy a lot of times. And so that doesn't necessarily sound. And when I first started kind of paying attention to that and seeing that, and then when I started going back and doing some reflection on some of the leaders that I've had throughout the years, the ones that always stand in my mind are the ones that are empathetic. And so I think in a lot of ways that's maybe viewed as a weakness in a lot of times, through a lot of lenses, especially in depending on what capacity you're working in. But the reality and what I believe empathy is just being, it's being able to kind kind of mold yourself to the situation that you're in. And so you can be an empathetic leader and still be tough.
Yeah.
Right. And you can be an empathetic leader and then show, care and concern and compassion. And I think, especially in ACS, I think that's, from what I've observed in my time there, I think that's one of the most important things that these guys need. You can be tough on them. And some of them come from tough backgrounds. And I think as long as it's coming from a place of love and respect, then I think that's something that is soaked in and they really take a hold to.
Yeah. What's the difference, or how have you adjusted between, you lead in two different areas. You lead strong, hardcore dudes. These are some former military, police officers. Y'all are making arrests, working a dangerous job. Like, you've got some pretty hardcore guys you're leading on the one hand. And then on Sundays, you're leading. Honestly, our team is a majority older ladies that are in their 50s, 60s, that kind of are maternal figures. We've got some older guys, and really nobody under the age of 40 besides me. And so it's a very, very different two types of people that you're leading. What have you kind of found has been maybe an adjustment I've had to make in leadership, maybe something that's been the same that you didn't realize would be the same? Kind of just talk about the two different styles of leadership that you have, or two different types of people.
Yeah, no, I think to effectively lead people, you don't have to know everything about them, but you have to find some common ground and understand what, kind of what makes them tick. And, you see the different personalities, you can observe how they interact with the boys. And it's the same thing at work too. And so a lot of the principles are the same, but really communicating with them, understanding kind of what makes them go and what makes them stop. And then, if they're having struggles, what are the struggles, and really trying to understand that. But I think at the end of the day, it's just being with people and talking to them. And we don't have all the right answers, and we won't ever have all the right answers. But as long as you're there and you're present and you show a respect and you just have some type of communication, right? And be there kind of like a shepherd and the flock.
Yeah.
And you can be tough on them, but you also have to care for them. And then the longer that you do that, and the longer that you're with them, and you show that you were there for the right reasons and that you have their best interest at heart, I think people really, really cling on to that.
Yeah.
And so for me, the backgrounds and the, who they are is almost irrelevant. But what are the things that people are going to respect, and how and make you available to come to get advice, or to be around, or just to talk with.
Yeah. One of my favorite phrases right now, or sayings, and it's something that I stole from Jay Brown and the What You Gonna Do podcast, but it is, shepherds smell like sheep. And I think you're a great example of this. When we're leading at ACS, we're not just there saying, hey, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do that. There is a leadership level of, we are in charge of making sure the structure of the service flows well, the chairs are set out, the snacks are ready for the young men, the room looks clean, kind of delegating some different responsibilities. But then there's also, we can't be afraid to be over there wiping something sticky off the floor. Right. We can't be afraid as leaders to be out there moving chairs around. And a couple weeks ago we had a baptism, and you were out there with some of the guys helping set up the baptismal font and really just working in the weeds and being in the weeds with those guys. And I think there's a very fine balance of, you don't want to be so occupied with the work and the task that you forget to actually lead, but it's so important. One of Amanda, my wife's favorite sayings is that she wants to coach with coach with a towel, not a clipboard. Yep. And so she wants to be in there with you, not just telling you what to do. And I think you do a great job of that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, and I agree with all of that. And then on the work side, so the phrase that I use at work is, you have to stay relevant. And so, with the multiple teams that I supervise, and I'm not out there with them, that's not my role to be out there with them every day. And I certainly don't want to be out there in a supervisory capacity where that kind of undermines the team leader role. And so that's the hierarchy, right? So you have the commander, deputy commander level, and then you have your team leader, then you have your task force officers. And so, but you can't be absent either. And so I pick and choose, my times to be out with the teams, just to stay relevant, because the way that I look at it is, how can I be expected, or how can I gain the respect of those that are under me if I'm not out there with them in the weeds with them, like you said, right? And so you go out there and you get dirty and you get sweaty and you do all the things, and then, but you're empowering them to take that job on and do that job, and I trust them, and they have the trust in me. But you can't be absent either. So I think that's the same thing that you're saying with ACS is, we can go set the computer up and just sit there, or we can go do the things that need to be done to help that service run clean and efficiently and make everybody feel welcome.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite story? Obviously, we can't reveal the young men's names for privacy reasons, but do you have any favorite stories from recent history at ACS? Maybe a cool encounter you've had?
Wow. I think maybe not one specifically, but I've had a few of them that have come up. And maybe the ones that, like, if you look from a distance, it maybe look a little more reserved, and then maybe they're not as into the service as some of the other ones are. But then as time has gone by, and I think when they get to know you, they come up, and then like just the conversations that they have, and you're like, wow, I didn't really think that, this one was going to come up and say that. And it's it's very caring and compassion, and I think that's dangerous in a lot of ways for us. It may be any biases that we have, or maybe some maybe preconceived notions that we have by people that are not maybe as engaged or kind of sitting off to the side, and then when you actually get to know them and they really open up to you, and they talk about their family, they talk about what they want to do with their future, they talk about their walk in faith, and how that's shaping them. And so I really think that's been probably the most enlightening thing for me, and with my time at ACS anyway, and saying like, I didn't really see that one coming from that guy, but it is, and it's there, and you're like, well, it's very interesting, and it's super cool to see kind of the evolution of some of them over time.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to go into a juvenile ministry of any kind with a preconceived notion that, hey, these are bad kids. And what really and truly at the end of the day it is it's kids that have just grown up in bad circumstances, that have made some mistakes. The facility that we're at is it's very unique actually, in the fact that it's more of a rehabilitation for victims and perpetrators. And so a lot of these kids, it's just, and I mean, not by kids, it's 8 to 18 years old. And so it's just, a lot of time it's just victims of bad environment, bad childhoods, a lot of trauma that they've just acted out on. So it's easy to go in with that preconceived notion of these are bad kids. And the first time a 10-year-old little boy walks up to you and just starts talking your ear off and just wants your love and attention, it just melts your heart.
Yeah, it is. And and I think that's the carryover from my work, being on the street, and then going into ACS is, just by the nature of our job and what we've signed up to do, we deal with people, and a lot of times that are having, either gone through or experiencing some of the worst times of their life, and we deal with people that have criminal histories that are 25 pages long, and then you see some of that, and a lot of the times we're prepping for people that we may go arrest. We're like, this is a really, really bad guy. Yeah. And, you encounter them, and then nothing happens, right? And perfectly pleasant, very respectful. And so, and I see a lot of that, like, again, you try to go with an open mind, but as well as be educated on, especially in my work, we have to be educated on as best we can on who the people are, what they're wanted for, and some of their history. And that does shape our response a lot of times, or it kind of shapes our mindset and how we're going to deal with them, as it should a lot of times. But not to do that in ACS, that's kind of been a little bit of a trick for me. Mm-hmm. But I don't know all their background, but obviously they're not similarly situated to a lot of other 10, 12, 14-year-olds are either. So, but at the end of the day, they're just kids, and they could be victims of their circumstances, and they could have made some bad decisions or whatever it may be. But they're getting help, and we're part of that journey for them, and I think that's super important. But going there with an open mind, and just be open, and treat every one of them with respect, and try to get to know them, and help them with their faith, and get them to a better place. Mm-hmm.
So you're obviously very involved in ACS. That occupies at least some of your time. You're very invested in that. You can just hear the passion in your voice about it. You have a very high pressure job that requires you to lead well, to be excellent all the time. But you're also a father of two kids. Remind me your kids' ages again.
They're 9 and 7.
Both girls, right?
Both girls.
So you're outnumbered.
Yes.
You are very outnumbered.
The only one.
How have you failed maybe as a father, and how have you succeeded, or maybe what have you learned from that, and having such a high pressure job that requires some of your time, a lot of your time honestly, and some traveling and things like that? Kind of what's some lessons that you've learned about parenthood through this?
Yeah, so I'll start with my wife. She's a school teacher, so she has a high pressure job too, and I would never want to do that job. I don't know how she does it. She's done it for a long time. Goodness gracious, I'd be in so much trouble if I was a school teacher. I don't know how she puts up with that stuff. She prays a lot, and so that helps. I know with her, I know she worries, and we talk about the pressures of that job, and then the circumstances that I could find myself in, the dangers of the job, and what that may look like for our family down the road. But again, we stay in prayer. We know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and that the path has been laid out, and we're just going to follow that path. And so on a day-to-day basis, so that kind of takes care of the overview of the job and the pressures of the job and how it may affect our relationship. But I think on a micro level, I shouldn't go 4, 6, 8 hours without shooting a text message, right? Hey, I'm here, I love you. Hey, just checking in. How's your day going? Especially in the summer, because she's not in the classroom. She's super busy with teaching stuff and professional development, but she's at the house, and so I think those days kind of drag out for her a little bit. And so just taking 30 seconds, just checking in, and so that helps kind of ease some of the day-to-day pressures a little bit, and just know, hey, I'm with you, I'm present, and is there anything that I can do, right? And so that helps on the spouse side, I think, in a lot of ways. And then being open about what's going on and trying to talk about, because a lot of times we try to compartmentalize this, and this segues into with my kids. There are some frustrations, there are some challenges, there are some high pressure situations at work, and I try my best not to bring those home, because they don't deserve to. And I'll say this, and I'm not very good at it, but this is what I'm aiming for, right? My goal is not to let that affect how I father and what kind of husband I am. In reality, it does, and so I try to compartmentalize that, and I try to finalize a lot of the things at work, and not let that carry over. Now, this is a 24-hour job, and my phone will ring on the weekends and stuff like that. So there's not necessarily a hard line separation between work and home, because it just can't be. That's just not the nature of the job. But I do try to leave work or go to work with something finalized, so it doesn't drag in to the home life. So both of my kids are very active, and multiple sports and dance and all tumbling and all the stuff, right? And so I coach my oldest one's softball team, who's a very competitive travel softball team, and she deserves 100% of that. Mm-hmm. And so, and my youngest does too with what she does, and so does my wife, right? And so what I try to do is, when it's time to be with them, it's time to be with them. And again, that's really, well, I think it sounds good. It's not always in practice, but try to be present as best you can, and make sure that things are not dragging on that are going to affect. Now, have I gone home and taken my frustrations out with discipline or yelling at the kids? And yeah, of course. Yeah. And I feel terrible about that. And then I try to have, they're old enough now, I think, where, I can explain to them, hey, that's not necessarily on you. Now, we have to be well behaved, we have to be respectful and all the things, but maybe my reaction is not solely focused on what was the discipline at the time, right? And so I just try to communicate that with them. I think I've gotten a little bit better over the years with that. Making sure that, hey, let's make sure these are two separate things and they're not bleeding over. I know when I go to church and small group and in prayer, I pray for that, the guidance on that. I pray for I think patience is mentioned the vast majority of time when I pray, and I'm not by nature not a very patient person, and so I know that if I don't look to God, if I don't stay in prayer, I know I can see a difference in my reactions at home and at work, and I know that I have to stay faithful in that, and just for the wisdom to make the difference, to be different at work than I am at home, yeah. Right? And so I think going back to DISC, there's a natural and adapted style on the assessments, my natural and adaptive style are virtually the same. And so I'm not necessarily a different person personality wise at work than I am at home. And I think that is a challenge a lot of times, because I shouldn't, there's instances where I shouldn't try to run the household like I run stuff at work. But again, drawing back to the empathy side, that's a strength, I think, with those styles being similar, because I think I am an empathetic leader, and try to draw down, to that level and how I operate. And so that can be helpful, but I also don't need to treat my family like I'm treating a team of, grown men who are going to arrest violent felons either. So, so that's been a challenge in a lot of ways. And again, just for me, it's staying in prayer, making sure that I'm asking for wisdom and patience. And I think that's the key for me.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times now community and your men's small group and things like that. How has being in community with men impacted your life and your spiritual growth?
Well, you are who you hang around with. And there have been times where when I haven't had that, or before I got into my small group, where are we drawing good mentors and examples from? And so, if you're, again, going back to the work side, if you're constantly around the things that we see, there's a lot of violence, and there's a lot of things that you see and you hear and you experience. If that's all you see, you hear, and you experience, then it's really hard not to be that. And so finding that small group through Highlands was clearly a God thing. And, I get to interact with people that are not in my line of work, that are, they're business people, and they're, salesmen, and they're all kind of things, right? They come from a bunch of different backgrounds, and to hear that we, the things that we talk about there, we all kind of struggle with the same thing, and it's just different perspectives. But it's been refreshing. But then you also have the prayer that you fall back on. You have, great leaders there that are going through, they're strategically picking the chapter that we're reading in the Bible, and then can draw that back down to what we're all dealing with, and then, or the podcast that we're listening to, and developing, a leadership style or character through God, at the home and at work. And so that's been great. And I would like to think, that's certainly helped me, along the way, especially over the last couple of years.
That's good, bro. Speaking of work, we got to get you to work here in just a second. But as a closing kind of thing, if you could give a piece of advice to every young man in America, just one piece of advice to every young man in America right now, what would it be?
I would say pray. Really fine tune what your morals are, and your morals are drawn through your Christian faith. And as long as that points you in the direction that you want to go, and that's what you're aiming for, I think that's the most important thing. So, pray for that guidance, pray for that wisdom, pray for patience. Pray for that path that you're supposed to walk down. Understand that your morals are derived from your Christian faith, and that's your compass that you should follow, and whatever that leads you to. And I think, and that's what I asked for. And I think as long as you're going down that path, through God, I think that's the best path for you.
So good, bro. Well, thank you for being here, Ross. I truly appreciate you, and it has been an honor and a privilege to have a conversation with you this morning, as well as to get to serve with you week in and week out at ACS.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see y'all next time.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Unshaken podcast. Stay strong, stay rooted. Like and subscribe wherever you're listening, and share this with a man who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below, let us know how we're doing, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Unshaken Men's Podcast. See you next time.